How's it hanging, Pawpossum? I've recently learned that there is a human ritual practiced this time of year called pumpkin carving, and I think it sounds delightful. So, I decided to try my hand at it. Now, to carve a pumpkin, the main thing you need is a pumpkin. I chose this one because I like its shape and texture. You also need a knife, a big old spoon, and some kind of vessel for the pumpkin insides. This can get pretty messy, so ideally I'd be doing this outside. But it's been a drizzly mid-Atlantic fall so far, some of my favorite weather personally. But for the sake of the camera and lights, I figured I should work indoors. So I threw this cloth on the floor for easy cleanup. While researching this tradition, I came across this viral video wherein Babs gives some pumpkin carving pro tips. I'm gonna try a couple of them, starting with sitting with the pumpkin in my lap. And so, with Halloween flair, I sit in the chair. Whew. Now, let's get to carving. You can see I'm carving the bottom of the pumpkin rather than the top. This was another tip from Babs, but working with the pumpkin in my lap is quite nerve-wracking. I'm afraid I might stab myself. Which is a good place to remind everyone that children should not be handling knives, especially in a manner like this. However, I will most likely continue carving pumpkins in my lap, because it was generally more comfortable. Now for scooping out the insides. Babs says you can use a hand mixer to loosen up the strings, but I don't have one of those, so I'm just using a big spoon. Taking out the bottom of the pumpkin actually made this process a lot easier, because the seeds and strings are attached more firmly to the bottom than to the top. So just a light scraping with the spoon did the job. To draw on my design, I'm using an orange dry erase marker. On a pumpkin this bumpy, I knew any attempt at erasing marker would get messy, so I used a marker that was nearly invisible. Though of course I can see the drawing much better than the camera can. Why don't you try to guess what I'm carving? While I'm carving, I have a question for you. Do you know the roots of this tradition? That was a hint. Originally, the Irish, Scottish, and English carved Halloween lanterns out of turnips and other root vegetables. But when they brought that tradition to America, the pumpkin lantern was born. It seems like a natural innovation to me. Pumpkins are larger, they're practically hollow already, and they're native plants with a long history with the peoples of North America. Pumpkins, and many of their relatives in the cucurbita genus, generally known as squash, have been immensely important crops to North Americans since long before any Columbus expedition. Squash may have even been the earliest crops cultivated by indigenous Americans, before even corn And of course, the squash cultivated by the indigenous Americans supported the European colonists, securing their cultural importance for future Americans. It's not surprising that pumpkins continue to be a vital element of celebrating the North American autumn. While carving a pumpkin is a great time to contemplate the crop's history and the tradition's history and appreciate your role in their futures. Now that the carving's done, I decided that the pumpkin needed a little extra pizzazz. So I cut a couple of ears out of pink paper and stapled them to the top of the pumpkin. Then I drew on some scrungly whiskers with a black permanent marker. All set. Time to put it out front and light it. I've got a big scented candle lit and ready, so let's place this pumpkin. And there you have it. Isn't it scary? I wouldn't want to mess with that guy. I have some last thoughts about carving the bottom of the pumpkin. On one hand, I can use a nice big candle because there's a lot of space freed up at the bottom. But on the other, I have to lift this whole pumpkin every time I want to light or blow out the candle. I think in the future, I'll cut out the top and the bottom. Thanks for watching, Pawpossum. If you want me to keep making videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, have a happy Halloween.